And early in our conversation, you touched on the carnivore diet, and this seems to be a growing trend in the health and wellness space. People adopting this either short term to lose weight or longer term as a way of living indefinitely. How do you feel about that diet in both those cases?
Yeah. So um, I think the first thing I want to say about it is that there's no question, and I've seen this, personally firsthand, that the carnivore diet can be game changing and even life saving for some people. In particular, the group that I've seen the biggest shift in is people with severe autoimmune disease. I've had patients and also just people I'm aware of, and I'm sure some folks have heard of higher profile folks like Jordan Peterson's daughter, who adopted a carnivore diet, who had very severe autoimmune condition that was not responding to any kind of treatment, whether conventional or otherwise. And then, after a certain period of time on a carnivore diet, they go from being like bedridden and debilitated to being able to live a fairly normal life. So that is remarkable. It's remarkable to be able to achieve that with just dietary change. If I were in that situation myself, that would be a very compelling approach to consider and even do. And I might find myself doing it if I were in that situation. However, the fact that an intervention or a treatment can be very effective in the short term does not guarantee that it is, number one, safe in the long term, even for that one individual who is positively affected by it. And number two, it certainly doesn't mean that it's a general health strategy that everybody should do, right? I mean, to use a sort of crude example, somebody breaks their arm and it's probably appropriate for them to wear a cast, and that cast is going to help them get better. But once their arm gets better, they don't it's not really good to keep wearing that cast. Your muscles are going to atrophy. Your bones probably not going to heal, continue to heal properly. And nobody does that, right? You don't continue to wear the cast at that point. Likewise, if you break your arm, Jesse, I'm not going to wear a cast. It's maybe a nice thought to show some solidarity if I'm your friend, but that doesn't really make any sense. So that's a crude analogy. It's not exactly applicable here, but just because someone who with the severe autoimmune disease has a life altering change on a carnivore diet, that doesn't mean that it should be a general health strategy that people without that kind of condition should follow. Number one, nor does it mean that there couldn't be some long term negative effects. There are some nutrients that are underrepresented or completely absent in if you're just consuming 100% purely animal foods. And I'm concerned about what deficiency of those nutrients could lead to over time. As I mentioned before, there's no fermentable fiber on a carnivore diet, so we don't know what the long-term impacts of it are on the gut flora. Um, a lot of people who pursue, at this point, I should say that there are different ways of doing a carnivore diet. There's smarter, better informed ways, and then there are ways that are not very well informed. So, for example, you could do a carnivore diet where you're eating lean cuts of meat like steak, but also organ meats, and then more gelatinous, collagen rich foods like oxtail or shank or chuck roast or brisket or things like that. You could do a carnivore diet that has zero plant foods, or you could do one that contains like some small amount of plant foods, maybe some honey and some other strategically included foods to help shore up some of the potential nutrient issues. I've seen over the last few couple years in particular that there seems to be an evolution now in the carnivore movement to a little bit less rigidity and just a little bit more careful thinking about what else can be added that would still preserve the benefits that people are getting, but lessen some of the potential downsides and risks. So like everything else in health and nutrition, it depends what type of carnivore diet someone is following. But um, I would say that for most people, again, a combination of plant and animal foods is going to be best. Are there some situations where a carnivore diet can be incredibly beneficial? Yes. Do we know what the long-term effects of a carnivore diet are? No. It has not been really around long enough as a strategy. It hasn't been studied rigorously in any kind of longer-term clinical trials. We don't know of any ancestral populations around the world that followed an exclusively carnivore diet. Certainly some people like the traditional Inuit and Maasai get a large portion of their calories from animal foods, but they do consume some plant foods, and they actually go to fairly great lengths to trade for them or just consume them at certain times of year when they're more available. So I think we're flying blind, and that doesn't mean that it will turn out to be harmful long term, but it means that we just don't know. Whereas we have 2 million years of hominid evolution telling us that some combination of plant and animal foods can be is normal for humans and is beneficial.
If you enjoyed that clip, press here for the full episode. I'll see you over there.
Most recent research suggests that over 90% of Americans fall short of the optimal intake of not just one, but several micronutrients. This is also true in other developed countries around the world. So there definitely has been a decline.